Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of The Berlin File, a South Korean action thriller from 2013 that was directed by Seung-wan Ryoo, one of the most reliable directors out there, actually. The only movie Ryoo did that I did not like was his most recent one, The Battleship Island. I was not a fan of that. You can see my review on this channel in a separate review video. All of his films before that one are worth watching, in my opinion. So I thought it might be a good idea to review one of his more entertaining films, in my opinion. The Berlin File certainly qualifies. Now, after a tense illegal arms deal in a Berlin hotel involving a North Korean spy, played by Jung-woo Ha, a Russian broker, and a Middle Eastern terrorist, all these people are involved in this, and it goes bad. When it's disrupted by unknown assailants. Our lead character, named Pyo, narrowly escapes but encounters conflicting evidence that may reveal that he was set up. Also investigating the failed weapons sale, an embattled South Korean intelligence agent named Jung, played by Suk-kyu Han, goes after Pyo to uncover his identity, but is left trying to figure out whether or not this guy is a double agent or if he's taken the fall for a more insidious plot. So finding himself embroiled in this international conspiracy, the South Korean agent must determine North Korea's role in the deal, as well as any potential involvement of the American CIA, international terrorist organizations, and other covert operatives in the Berlin underworld. So, as you could probably tell from that plot synopsis, the Berlin File has a rather convoluted storyline. Korea came out with two other action thrillers during the early to mid 2010s, Assassination and The Suspect, that were also highly entertaining, but also had stories that were probably a bit too convoluted for their own good. Whenever I think of one of these films, I think of the other two, just because they're all like very entertaining action thrillers, but you think they could have streamlined the story a little better, right? Now, some may argue that all three of these movies may have benefited from a more simplistic story. But, sometimes when I think about it, I'm not entirely sure of that. Because these complicated plots make you think. Because there's a lot of different characters. You're like, as the movie's going on, you're like, wait, who is this person working with this person? Or wait, why did that guy do that? Who's getting double-crossed? Stuff like that. You have to pay close attention to the details in order to figure out like who's working with whom and why they're doing what they're doing. The Berlin File, like the other two films I mentioned, I think does make sense by the end of the film when all is said and done. But you may need to watch it a few times within a short period of time to kind of understand everything, all those little details. And I must admit that the plotting and conflicts really did hold my interest in between the action scenes. So, I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence as to whether or not a more streamlined, simplistic story would have worked for these movies or not. But let me know what you think. So Suk-kyu Han, who we've been covering a lot on this channel recently, actually, had an interesting observation in a behind-the-scenes featurette. He said that the central theme of the Berlin File is these people who are left out in the cold by their own governments because of changing national interests. So that's kind of the theme of the film. I think he succinctly summarized that for us. So the script, when you look at it, really relies more on plotting, mystery, and action than it does traditional character development, which could be a problem for some viewers out there. We do get a feel for the characters, their morality and maybe their dilemmas here, but there's not a whole lot going on in terms of multidimensionality or complexity of the characters themselves. So, just something to keep in mind. It wasn't a big problem for me because the film engaged me in other ways. I've said it before on this channel. I don't care how a film interests me or engages me. It just has to do it, and this film does it. The Berlin File is paced quite well, I think, despite the fact that much of the action is backloaded to the second half. There is a little bit of action during the opening half, a few short sequences. There is a pretty good chase shootout, like a foot chase shootout during the opening half, which I enjoyed. It also involves like a subway line. But that first half of the film is more concerned with bouncing between all these different characters and different factions of characters and kind of setting things up for the explosive second half. So at least you're not just sitting there kind of waiting for something to happen. At least I wasn't. I was still kind of engaged as to what was going on, and you could see the situation kind of slowly spiral out of control, which is pretty good. And then the action does hit hard right around the middle point. Right around the middle point it hits. The action physics and the design are pretty grounded and realistic for the most part. I mean, there is some unrealistic stuff in this, but in terms of the physics, you don't have people like flying around, The more exciting action set pieces are, obviously in the middle to the second half, especially the fights and the shootouts that occur in claustrophobic apartment complexes. So the first memorable set piece is kind of a fist fight shootout combination that takes place inside of an apartment. It's pretty hard-hitting and fun to watch. I mean, fight scenes, if you've noticed, in Korean films are not usually presented as cleanly as the better Hong Kong or like Indonesian martial arts films, or even Japanese samurai films. The fights in the Berlin File use more edits and camera angle changes that are not as clean as I typically like, but again, the edits are spaced out enough so you can see everything. So, even though it's not as clean as I really prefer, it's not a jumbled mess. You know what I mean? It's not. It's actually pretty effective. This isn't like, a Paul Greengrass movie or that recent Mile 22 flick, which I will not be reviewing on this channel. So you're not going to get that here. But I like the way the fights were staged overall. Much of the action in the Berlin File, though, is actually in the form of shootouts and chases, both foot chases and car chases. There's a shootout chase combination soon after the apartment fight that begins indoors and then moves around to the streets. And that scene was also a lot of fun to watch. I'm a big fan of practical squib effects for bullet shots, bullet damage in surrounding environments. And this movie uses a ton of squibs. So, if you've seen behind-the-scenes featurettes before, they'll put little explosive charges in the walls or wherever, and then they'll set them off while they're filming the gun battles. And it creates a very... you see all the damage that the gun creates, practical damage to the sets, which I think really adds an excitement level to gun battle scenes. So I'm glad they used a lot of those in this. I was appreciative of that. And then there's the finale, which I think satisfies. Suk-kyu Han's character uses a very unusual gun that I've never really seen in a movie before. At least I don't remember seeing it. Very odd weapon. It looks really cool, though, so bonus points for that. And another behind-the-scenes thing I saw was that the director specifically requested from the weapons technicians and advisors to find guns that are not common in movies. So, and that caused some difficulties on their end finding these guns and getting permits and stuff. But that was pretty cool. I like that. It's a little different, and it's kind of fun to watch somebody whip out a gun. You're like, what the heck is that thing? So you have that here as well. So really, the entire second half of the Berlin File is highly entertaining, action thriller, crowd pleasing stuff. So, and Ryoo, this director, can direct action very well, and he has a history as an action director, so that comes through here. Sound design is impressive, especially during the action scenes. The sounds that the guns make are pretty neat, because again, they're unorthodox guns, so it's a little different. I read that the production was shot mostly in Germany, hence the Berlin File, but there's also some production in Korea and Latvia, so it's a little different for a Korean action flick. And then the cast. I haven't even talked about really much of the cast yet. I mean, you got Jung-woo Ha, right? You have Suk-kyu Han, but then you also have Seung-bum Ryoo, Ji-hyun, and even Do-won Kwak has like a small supporting role. So the performances are spot on. The cast is pretty loaded here. And actually, most of these actors, you may not think of it, but most of these actors have experience working on action films in the past. Even though they're not really action stars, so to speak. So it's, all this comes through. They work together very well as a team. So the Berlin File is very entertaining stuff. I've watched it, like when I watched it recently, it was like the 5th time I've seen it, and it's just as entertaining now as it was, back in 2013, 2014. So it seems to be holding up over time, and I think a lot of that is because a lot of the action is grounded and practical. Very nice introduction to this director if you're not familiar with him. It's available on Amazon streaming in the United States as well as physical media. My old DVD, the Region 1 release, has a pretty cool, like 83-minute long behind-the-scenes featurette that's got some good stuff in it, just to let you know. And as always, we'll see you next time.